Then I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Freedom House.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Soy Rosa María Payá.
Thank you very much. I'm coming from Cuba. In 2012, through the collection
We have point of order. Cuba, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We take the floor at this time on a point of order under Article 113 of the United Nations General Assembly rules. At this time, we are listening to a supposed representative of the so-called NGO Freedom House. Nevertheless, public information that exists on this person and organization indicate that they are not a member. So for that reason, under Article 7 of the Rules of the Council, where it states that the participation of NGOs shall be based on statements that have been deposited under an ECOSOC resolution of 1996 and practices observed by in the field of human rights should be used to basic accreditation. And we would ask that this be observed at this time.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. We highlight that the United States firmly believes that accredited NGOs must be permitted to speak in the Council. Though member states, including the U.S., may occasionally disagree with the content of NGO statements, it is essential that civil society voices be heard here in an atmosphere of open expression. Without addressing the substance of the speaker's statement, we are of the opinion that we have heard of the interventions so far is indeed addressed to the subject matter at hand before this Council in this item for general debate. However, Mr. President, we respectfully ask that you rule that the speaker be allowed to finish her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We entirely agree with the arguments given by the Cuban delegation regarding taking the floor and accreditation of NGOs at the session, and therefore we support the comment regarding the procedural rules.
Thank you. Which country? Canada. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. President. Canada supports the comments put forward on the procedural rules as outlined by the United States. As they've said, accredited NGOs must be able to speak. It is essential that civil society voices be heard in this Council. And like the U.S., without addressing the substance of the intervention, we ask that the Speaker be able to complete the statement. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Venezuela.
Thank you, President. Venezuela supports the intervention made by the Cuban delegation and the Russian Federation along the same lines. The fact is that the point here is has nothing to do with freedom of information, as some have pointed out here. What we're talking about here is a procedural matter, and the United Nations system has set up its own rules to govern the activities of these fora and participation. Of course, that's important in them. But at the end of the day, these rules and regulations are respected by all. So we have to corroborate that the rules established for this Council should be totally respected. Hence our support for the point of order expressed by the Cuban delegation. Thank you, President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be brief. The UK supports the right of accredited NGOs to speak at the UN Human Rights Council and its associated meetings in line with established practices. Whilst we may not endorse all the comments made, we support the right of NGOs to make them. We request that the Speaker be allowed to finish their statement. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
Mr. President, my delegation supports the procedural point raised by Cuba. Would like to ask you, Mr. President, to uphold our rules of procedure. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iran.
My delegation would like to support the point of order raised by the delegation of Cuba, followed by the Russia, China, and Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Slovenia.
The Human Rights Council serves as a platform for open dialogue, for sharing opinions and experiences. We believe that the feedback and input of civil society is important in advancing the discussion on human rights, and their engagement should be encouraged by this Council. We therefore ask you to let the Speaker continue with his statement.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Egypt.
Thank you, sir. I believe that the point of order is not related to listening or not listening to the representative of NGOs and the civil society. We are all here to hear these organizations and their vision as far as the matters under consideration are concerned, and this is why the room is full. This is not the issue now. However, the issue is if the NGO has an accreditation and a status with ECOSOC in a way that would allow the organization to share in the work of the Council in accordance with the rules that were set by the states, the rules that govern the work of this Council. Consequently, I suggest, in order not to waste more time, to move to the next speaker on the list, whereas the Secretariat would investigate the status of this NGO. If it's accredited, then the NGO can take the floor again. And if it is not accredited, then it might be necessary to reconsider how we allow the NGOs to take the floor, unless, of course, they have already fulfilled all the conditions that are set for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are almost at the end of the list of countries who asked for the floor, so I will give them the floor. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation would like to support point of order raised by Cuba, which is based on rules and regulations set forth by the General Assembly and is based on procedural grounds. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bolivia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also support the point of order raised by Cuba. We are really not debating the question of freedom of speech at this time. What we want to see here is a strict following of the rules of procedure in terms of procedures for accreditation.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, sir. My delegation would like to confirm the following. The objection made by Cuba has nothing to do with the freedom of expression that we respect. We are all here as delegates. We are all here to listen to NGOs. The matter is related to clear, accurate procedures that allow any NGO that has accreditation can take the floor. Consequently, after I support the procedure of the statement of Cuba, I also support the proposal made by Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Democratic Peoples of Korea, Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
My delegation endorses the interventions made earlier in support for the point of order raised by the Cuban delegation, and we request that the rules of the procedure be strictly abided by. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Eritrea.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also would like to endorse the point of order raised by Cuba, and it has nothing to do with the substance of the freedom of expression. This is simply procedural, and the Council should abide itself, and the NGOs should also have the same procedures that they should follow, and I think this is the point raised, and I also endorse the point of order that was raised by Cuba. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me remind the distinguished representatives about rules and practices governing the accreditation of individuals as NGOs representatives. At the outset, let me emphasize that this responsibility rests with the NGO representative. The Secretariat has a responsibility to prevent access to UN premises by any person without valid accreditation. An accreditation is valid and allows access to the Council premises when it is granted to an NGO in consultative status with the ECOSOC. Complaints against NGOs' behavior and conduct should be forwarded directly to the NGO Committee of ECOSOC. The Secretariat has verified on the basis of the records of the NGO Liaison Office and the Department for Economic and Social Affairs in New York that the concerned individual has indeed been authorized to represent the NGO which has ECOSOC status. With this, I give back the floor to the Speaker.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much. In 2002, through a forced collection of signatures by the Cuban government for a change to the constitution, changing the state and giving it a one-party character, we saw that this limited competition and prevented citizens from having their own elected representatives. For years now, the Cuban people has not been able to vote freely. Who can deny that this situation really exists for Cubans? We would ask that the Council and the President of the United States, who will be welcome to my country next week, that he support civil and human rights, and that he support a binding proposal for a national consultation. Today we know that Rosa Payá, my father, who has spoken to the European Parliament, was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, was murdered.
We have a point of order again. Cuba, you have the floor.
Mr. President, we have to intervene once again on the basis of Article 103 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly of the United Nations. We are now abusing as well the rules of the procedure of this Council, especially concerning Resolution 1996-31 of ECOSOC. Accusations that are baseless pronounced by this representative against my country contravene that resolution. We would recall paragraph 57A, which states that an NGO has a consultative status should not draw up a list of statements that run in contrary to the United Nations Charter, including baseless actions or those that are motivated for political reasons against member states of the United Nations that are incompatible with these purposes and principles. This is what we have been seeing here. So I think we need to call the speaker to order here. And of course, Chairman, we have observed that the speaker here, before beginning to speak, has been taking photos here, and we have proof of this here, taking photos of the members of this council, and at the same time we see as well as other activities. And here we think this is something that can't be allowed in this room. This is also a violation of the regulations and norms of this body. So we would ask you, Mr. President, that this be applied not only to this NGO but others as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, without addressing the substance of the speaker's statement, we are of the opinion that what we have heard so far is addressed to the subject matter at hand, and we request that you allow the speaker to finish her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other request? No? Hmm? Who? I give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
Mr. President, I'd like to repeat that we support the position of Cuba because this matter involves the credibility and authority of our Council. We'd like to request you once again, Mr. President, to uphold our rules of procedure and keep the good order of this room. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Netherlands.
Thank you very much. The EU finds it important to respect the right of NGOs to take the floor and express their views, irrespective of our position concerning the substance of the statement. NGOs' input enrich the human rights dialogue. We believe that statements should not be interrupted because an NGO mentions concrete examples. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Venezuela.
Thank you, President. Venezuela supports the point of order raised by the Cuban delegation. Mr. President, we're not talking about whether one NGO or another should take the floor. What we're saying is that there are rules of procedure, and these rules have to be fulfilled. They have to be obeyed among us. It's not to say that we don't agree with the participation of NGOs in this council. The fact is that we all have to obey the same rules. And this is the kind of, and that has to do with the conduct that we have to observe here. So we'd also like to draw the President's attention to the fact that the Cuban delegation has made a denunciation of this violation of our rules. And we would really ask the chair to make a pronouncement on this in one sense or another. I think that we must remember that we have our norms here of what we can tolerate and what we can't tolerate, and we would continue to ask you not to let the NGO take the floor on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. President. As noted by our colleague from Venezuela, the rules of procedure must be followed. And we ask that the President respect the rule that civil society are able to participate and engage in dialogue here in the Council room, and that we respect the rule that provides that and civil society is able to take the floor. So we believe that the statement should not be interpreted or misconstrued because civil society may be raising concrete examples, and that this speaker be able to complete its presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would once again like to support Cuba. We need to understand that the point of order was meant not to discredit the NGO or not to say that it has no right to speak. What Cuban delegation has raised is that the representative is not duly accredited by the NGO which has given it the floor to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Thank you, Mr. President. We attach a high importance to the voice of civil society. We believe that the presentation of concrete examples of human rights violation under this agenda item is legitimate. States that would disagree with the contents of an intervention could make use of the right to reply. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. No more. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. The importance of civil society's role in promoting the work of the Council cannot be overemphasized. In this sense, we'd like to echo the remarks made by Netherlands, Canada, the United States, and Germany on having this NGO finish the presentation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, I support the point of order raised by delegation in Cuba, and through you, we request that the Council goes in line with the rule of procedures. Thank you.
I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would like to reiterate the position already stated by several delegations and emphasize the importance of NGO participation in the work of this Council. We therefore ask that the NGO in question be allowed to finish its statement. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. No more. Thank you very much. Human rights situations do not arise in a vacuum, and it is important to address human rights issues in their proper context. At the same time, all speakers are expected to address the relevant agenda item. As long as the speaker is addressing human rights issues relevant to the agenda item under consideration, he or she may refer to specific situations by way of example or illustration. We are in the general debate under item 4, so speakers are expected to raise issues or comment on human rights situations that require Council's attention, including a human rights situation at the country level. Due note has been taken of the comments made. And as far as pictures are concerned, please note that only duly accredited media representative may take photos. Having said that, I invite the speaker to resume her statement. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you. I am an orphan because of the Cuban government who punishes the idea of pluralistic thinking, claims to be a democracy, whereas they threaten different factions. My family and I have been threatened with death after an intervention in this forum in 2013. Mr. President, please try to prevent the impunity of the Cuban government and try to help save the lives of those who are defending human rights and democracy in Cuba. The delegation of the Cuban tyranny has, of course, been striving to do this. Point of order.
The floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. Once again, we have to take the floor, sir, on a point of order. 113, Article 113 of the Rules of Procedure. Here, the Speaker has been using very disrespectful language to the Cuban government. This is a clear violation of the General Assembly Resolution 10261, which in fact was the basis of this body, saying that this body would be governed by universality, impartiality, objectivity, and not subjectivity. Now, under the terms of that agreement, and with full respect for the right to dissent, criticizing the character and integrity of a delegation and the governments of states cannot be brought into question. Hence, as we have established in our practice in this body, we're not inventing anything new here. We demand that the Speaker use appropriate language which is fully in line with the norms of this Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Venezuela. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Venezuela.
Present, in line with the rules that have been assigned to this body, Venezuela would like to say that it is concerned. We find it really inconceivable to hear the kind of language that has been used by the Speaker in referring to a sovereign state in this forum. We are very concerned, and we feel that this kind of expression really questions the honorability of this body. So we would like to make it very clear that we're not talking about violating people's freedom of expression. The idea here is to observe the rules of procedure of the Council. Our experience here has always dictated that we not tolerate any kind of inappropriate expressions that put into question the honor of the members of this body or the body as a whole. Hence, we urge you, Mr. President, and under your prerogatives, that you withdraw the right to speak to that NGO. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, without reference to the substance, rather the relevance of the Speaker's statement, we ask that you please give her her last 12 seconds to complete her statement.
Who? Finished? Thank you very much. Again, we are in the general debate on the item 4. Titled Human Rights Situations That Require Council's Attention. So as long as the Speaker remains within the parameters of this agenda item, I think she has the right to speak. But at the same time, I'd like to call on everybody to adhere to language that is commensurate with the dignity consistent with the discussion on human rights. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Institute for Women's Studies and Research.